Jordan Schwarzenberger, thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
No. It's really great, and I mean, it was really interesting doing kind of the research into yourself and kind of all you've achieved in your relatively short business career. But let's just start with the Sidemen themselves. So for people tuning in now who don't necessarily know who they are, could you just tell us in your own words who the Sidemen are?
Of course. So the Sidemen are a collective of 7 content creators, all coming together under the one Sidemen group, formed in 2013, and they've been doing their thing now for 10 years this year. So this is their 10-year anniversary. And they're the biggest content creators in Europe, with numbers surpassing most major networks and most content creators around the world. They are absolutely huge. I would describe them as like, and Cal Freezy actually said it in recently in something in a new project which I can't talk about just yet. But he said that they're like the One Direction of YouTube, which is completely true. And I'd say they are almost like the One Direction of this generation when it comes to audience engagement. I've never seen anything like it really since that kind of fandom that One Direction had in the early 2010s. I think the Sidemen have got it now. It all sort of started for me working or seeing their hype and their madness, obviously from my friends and from people at school growing up in this generation, but also really for me in the 2017 charity match when I was working at Lab Bible. And they did a charity match for Southampton. Like they sold out 13,000 seats in about a minute or something crazy online. They could only have 13,000, which is one stand at Southampton, because any more and the police would have to have made it a proper incident essentially, so they couldn't get permission to do it more. But they literally sold out that stand instantly. I remember going to the game and being there when I was working at Sport Bible and just seeing these swathes of kids and their parents, armies of young people coming from around the world to see the Sidemen and their friends ultimately play football. And I just remember, at the end of the game, fans all rushed the pitch. It was complete chaos. They were chasing down all the players because they just had this deep kind of connection with these people, to the point where they just wanted to be near them, they wanted to touch them, they wanted to see them, on a level to the connection that you have with music, right? At the top, at the very top, you have that kind of intimacy, and I think people feel that to their favorite creators. I just remember literally everyone got pushed into the locker room, these kids banging down the doors like a scene from The Last of Us or something. You then had all of these kids chasing after the bus, trying to follow them to the hotel. It was pandemonium, and that was the first time for me where I went, okay, this is different. And they've just gone from strength to strength. Numbers anywhere from 200 plus million a month, 90 million I think average watch time a month. It's ridiculous numbers. Bigger than any network I go and speak to, an ITV or a Channel 4 or an Amazon today, and they're blown away by just the sheer scale and size of what the boys do, and their regular show Sidemen Sunday, which comes out every week, and it's this big kind of entertainment production, which is expensive, high production value, hour-long content, catering to an audience who we're told has no attention span. Well, the attention span is clearly working to its best when they're watching content like the Sidemen. So yeah, they're a joy to work with. I think it's been the most fun ever since we started managing them 2 years ago. We've done a number of different things which we can get into. And yeah, I think it's just the beginning really for them in terms of where they can go.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I mean, it's a very interesting dynamic, the YouTuber dynamic. Because I feel like there's a lot of people, especially maybe our audience, maybe a little bit older, who aren't necessarily, know characters like KSI, may have seen Prime, or their kids may talk about it, but there's a large percentage of the population that just doesn't know who these people are. However, the numbers that they have and the following they have is absolutely astronomical. So it's a really interesting dynamic that we've got with YouTube. But let's focus a little bit more on yourself. So you mentioned, obviously, you worked at Sport Bible. You are only 25 years old, and you are the manager of the Sidemen. But could you just fill in the gaps, kind of how your career started and got you to this point?
Absolutely. So I am 25 now. I first knew when I was at school, I think in my final year of school, and I was having to apply, but at school you sort of softly have to, right? Apply for university, go through that whole thing. And I remember just being there thinking, after having written my personal statement, got my my offers and all of that I just did not want to go to university. Like everything in my whole being was saying that this is going to be a waste of time, this is going to be a regret, don't do it. And I remember kind of going down that line, and just before the end of school I was like, right, I need to look around and see what else is there, because I had no idea. People at school, typically, you do a bit of work experience, you maybe have a few people come in and do talks, but you rarely get any sense properly of most industries, and the vast majority of jobs you just don't know that they exist. So I remember being there in my last year and thinking, right, I need to try and find out what is in the industry and what possible things there are that I could do. All the way through school, I sort of been very keen on building brands, and I'd loved kind of the creative process of things, whether it was making music or, I launched a clothing brand and a film magazine, all these different things during my time at school. And so I knew that creativity and brand building was something that I wanted to do. But I had no idea what that even was, right? You don't know what an agency is, how things are commercialized, all of that. So I remember going online thinking of all the companies that I could think of, Vice was a company that I thought at that time was cool. I think everybody did. 2015, like Vice is cool was literally a thing that you'd say. Not anymore, I don't think, really, but at the time, definitely. And I remember like thinking and looking on their website and saying, wow, there's a job here called a creative. That's actually a thing. Like, that's your job, to be creative. And it had under it things like, concept ideation, building like documentary formats, like pitching to brands, all these things. I was like, this is amazing. This is it. This is the job of a creative. It doesn't get any better than that. So I was like, okay, cool, I want to be a creative advice. Like, why not? So then I thought, okay, how do I get to that point? So I, at 70 years old, remember speaking to a friend of mine called Noah, who had done work experience there. I think he knows someone who was quite high up, and he had all of these emails on his system because he did work experience there, right? So I asked him one day in the library at school, Noah, can I have all of your emails from everybody at Vice? And I just want to send a note and see if anything comes back. I remember sending an email out to ask if I could come in and do work experience and, just speak to somebody there about some advice, just to get a sense of what the industry was. And 2 people said yes, about like 20 emails I think I sent. And one of them was was a girl called Amelia Abraham, who connected me to Ian, who was the head of the agency there. We got on really well, and he was like, yeah, come do work experience. So I was like, great. Did work experience there all the way through my last summer before I was due to start uni at King's College studying digital culture, which is a complete nothingness of an idea. Like, why I thought that was a good idea to do, I don't know. But I think for me, it was like digital culture as a course was like the least uni sounding course that I could do. So therefore do it because it felt applicable, weirdly, even though it wasn't, and they had no idea what they were doing. So I remember going there, did work experience over that summer, started at King's, and then dropped down at Vice to every Friday. So I'd go to Vice every Friday whilst I was at King's during the week. And I hated going to uni, but I loved working at Vice. And it built up and up and up to the point where before the Christmas holidays, had our Vice Christmas party, which was as sort of mad and chaotic as you can imagine. And I remember standing there with the creative director and the executive creative director, who were sort of my like line managers, if you will. And I love working with them. And they were like, look, if you want to drop out of uni and join us, like, we'd love for you to do that, but we don't want to annoy your parents. Like, but we will definitely have you in a heartbeat. So I was like, yeah, 100%. I literally left, and the next day I put all the emails in to drop out. Told my parents, I was like, right, I'm out, done. This is it. So yeah, dropped out of uni. And then started at Vice full time in January of 2016. I was there for 3 months before Ian, who's the head of the agency, asked me very discreetly if I wanted to come with him to start the agency over at Lab Bible. So Lab Bible, biggest social publisher in Europe, probably one of the biggest. I know they are one of the biggest in the world. They might actually be now. I think they are, with Unilad and Lad coming together. But yeah, he was like, I've got the opportunity to go to Lab Bible and start their agency, to build their commercial wing, help brands to work and create content with us to activate against the audience that Lab Bible has. I think it was over half of all young people in the UK between like under the age of 25 followed Lab Bible, like ridiculous numbers. And I was like, yeah, why not? Again, I loved Ian and I thought no risk. So I jumped over there, was there for a year and a half, loved it, had an amazing time. We did so many amazing things, got to travel, got to, go to these big events, got to host stuff, got to do all sorts, work with amazing brands. But then got to the end of that point and I was like, right, I've worked with a number of brands. I sort of naively, somewhat arrogantly maybe thought, okay, I can do it myself now. So I decided to launch my own agency called Roundabout, which was at the time the first ever Gen Z agency in the UK. This was 2017. And I did that in order to help brands, some of the contacts that I'd had and everything else, connect with the audience that I was from. The selling point always throughout my time was, I am young, I know what is culturally relevant to the audience that is me and my friends and the people that I know, and this sort of segment of society which you as a brand want. Therefore I can help you connect authentically, because I'm not like 40 years old, 50 years old, sat in a boardroom telling people what young people want. So it worked really well, and I did that for 6 months. And one of the clients was James Grant. And James Grant is a TV management business, the biggest in Europe as well. They look after everyone from an Anton Deck to a Philip Schofield to most of ITV, but then also now, Steve Aoki, Blink 182. They, have had numbers of clients, like huge people. And we started working with them to help them future-proof what they were doing. I was working on Ryland, Frank Lampard, and Reggie Yates at the time. Loved it. And it just got better and better working with them, to the point where I sat down with Mary, who was the MD of the entertainment division. She said to me, look, we'd love to have you as much time as you can give. If you wanted a full-time job here, we'd love to take you. And I thought about it, and I had a couple of other sort of interns and people who I've been working with on Roundabout, but we all just decided actually it was best for us all just to kind of, we've built this amazing case study. We've all been given these intros and this great way into the industry. Let's kind of go our separate ways. And I joined there as the Chief Creative Officer of YMU at James Grant at the time in 2018. I was there for 3.5, 4 years. Get to end the story now. Before Aaron, who was a friend of mine, or is a friend of mine still, of course, in the business management division, he had gone off to manage some TikTokers. So he is an accountant by trade, but he had gone off to manage TikTokers because he was always so much better than just an accountant. He would always help people with their business and their strategy, and he had a couple of amazing clients. But it wasn't quite big enough for me to do it with him at that point, or else I would have done. But then I decided, after speaking with him, and he met with Sam, who's our third co-founder now in Arcade, and Sam is like the YouTuber accountant. He's been looking after everyone in the scene for the last decade or so. And they got together, we then got together and realized that actually the Sidemen specifically needed or could have so much value added to what they were doing. I don't know how much your listeners will know about the sort of influencer management scene in the UK, but it's so fragmented, so many people kind of non-exclusively being represented, so everyone's undercutting everyone. There's a lot of sort of fractions and tensions and wars, and there's no unification for those at the top end. And the Sidemen being number one, it seemed glaringly obvious that they needed management. Like, there were all these managers, but no one managing them. Specifically in the management team they had, I don't think had been really strategically managing them for the long term, more around transactional, brand deals. Really, that is kind of the industry. So we ended up kind of going to them and saying, guys, look, this is where you are. This is a strategy. This is what I've been doing at YMU for the next 3 to 5 years. Like, how you can really build this and push this to the next level across every sector you could want, that feels authentic to you and adds value to your audience. And they were like, yeah, let's do it. So I handed in my notice, and we started at the beginning of April 2021. So it's nearly been 2 years, and it's been a whole world of fun. We've launched a fried chicken brand called Sides, a vodka brand called XX Vodka, membership club called Side Plus. We are doing hotels soon. Did the charity match last year, which raised over $1 million. We're doing all sorts of Christmas #1 with Christmas drillings at the end of last year, which I always forget about, as well as a whole host of other projects. So we're just building out and hopefully cementing the Sidemen as the leaders in this space, both from a content perspective, but also now from a business perspective, as we possibly can, and ultimately giving them the shine and the flowers that they deserve, I think, and trying to bridge the gap between the corporate world, who has typically not understood them, and them being at this really elite position in the culture. And I think hopefully we're doing that to a decent level.
It's really interesting. And I mean, again, what you've kind of described, it's quite mind-blowing that that's an 8-year journey. It's what you've achieved is absolutely brilliant. It really, really is. And, there's just so much that kind of jumps out when you tell your story. And I think one of those things, kind of going back originally to you just, cold reaching out to people advice. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of teenagers who wouldn't take that step, but, that's clearly something that was ingrained in you, that why not? I'm going to reach out. I'm going to ask the question. Like, where do you think that came from? That kind of attitude of like, you know what? I'm going to give it a go and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think I developed through school and through my parents being incredibly supportive as well. I think I developed, a creative, don't want to say fearlessness, but a sense of like, there's no, why be scared of failing? Like, there's no risk really, other than potentially you looking a bit dumb, but who cares really about what other people think? And I think I developed at school, like my school was great and was able to have so much freedom to do things like, make music, develop, short films, like create my clothing brand, do all these different things, and had so many tools at that school to support me in doing that, which I think, it led to a sense of creative experimentation when I was younger, to the point where I was quite used to launching things, starting things, testing things, putting things out there. I was, obviously grew up in the age of Facebook, which just sounds really old now, but like the age of sort of Facebook in the mid 2010s, and being in that era, as a sort of younger person, but somebody who wanted to creatively express themselves, like launching a clothing brand, like actually activating that stuff, like putting yourself out there to friends creatively, like that's a step. And I think once I started that step at around 13, 14 years old, it became easier and easier to do that as I got older. So I think, yeah, then things like sending an email out to give it a go when there's no real risk. What's the risk? They say no or they ignore you. I never sort of felt that sense that it was worth more to avoid doing that than it was to at least give it a shot. And I also think when I had my film magazine called Lost VHS, which I ran from like 2015 to 2012 to 2014, that kind of time with a few friends at school. It was all about reviewing films and going to film festivals and all of that. And we got to a point where, because we scattered out so many emails, and this is what I learned very quickly, you scatter out enough emails with some substance there and you will get some reply. I think we must send like 50 or so emails to as many different production companies and film festivals and cinemas as possible. And we had quite a few actually replies come back and say, right, yeah, we'll send you to screeners, we'll add you to the press list, we'll get you onboarded. So that for me was a big eye opener when I go, right, well, if you can just email that many people, if you can get the contact, email film magazines, ask to do reviews for them at scale, you do that enough times, there will be enough people coming back to you. Even if it's 20 emails, one reply, that one reply might be enough to ultimately change your life or change your presence or your brand. And I think it's worth therefore. And I always say to people, just send the email, but also expect 99% of people to ignore you, but do enough that you'll get 1% back, and that 1% might be enough for you to do everything you wanted. And that definitely happened to me. And I think if more people applied that kind of chaos theory mentality of just scatter, just like go for it, reach out to as many people as you can, they will get somewhere.
That makes complete sense. And, there is definitely a difference between working for someone and deciding to break off and do it yourself. So, that kind of entrepreneurial spirit yourself, was that something that do you think is ingrained in you? Or is that something you just found a gap and you were just like, we're just going to do this?
Yeah, I think it was, I guess building that confidence over the years and being somebody who enjoyed creatively expressing myself, if you will, from a business perspective. And I love the thing of sort of building brands and just putting things out there, creating logos is always a thing that I randomly loved doing, like making things feel like an entity. And I think, yeah, that for me, from an entrepreneurial perspective, was always a trait, like trying things, putting things out there, giving things a go. And the more you do, I guess, the more things just happen in life, right? The less you do, the less things happen. That's obvious. But I think in terms of, that entrepreneurial side of things, it was more, that's really been unleashed working with Aaron and Sam through Arcade more than anything now at a decent level. Because when I was at YMU, when I was at Lab Up on Bias, I was just learning for like 3-4 years. I'd always say, until you know enough about an industry, until you really know how things work, like it's worth working for somebody else, ultimately work on someone else's like dime, like that. I know it's a bit callous, but the idea of like learn through the process of being an employee, and then when you're ready and you actually have awareness, then go off and do it yourself. I think that's definitely the way I would advise most people, especially in the creative industry, to do it. Because I do think that being a salaried employee for the long term in this day and age is not the best thing commercially, but also creatively. I think there's so much opportunity out there. Why would you want to be stuck to someone else's decision making, especially when you know and you understand the space? And that was always the thing for me, whereby at other companies, loved them though I did, you'd always know you're under a hierarchy of decisions. And I think for me, as somebody who knew how to instinctively go from A to B, I think in most things, or in some things, and especially things that were culturally relevant to my age demographic and things that I grew up watching, experiencing, etc., I knew how to activate things. And I guess that's why they wanted me in those companies. But also, you're then still stuck under those structures of, yeah, but this might not work, or no, not with this, or whatever else. So creatively, you can only really be free if you're doing it for yourself. And I think that's one of the best things about doing what we're doing now, is we have the Sidemen as our ultimate board and our decision makers. But at the same time, we have so much creative trust from them to deliver and develop things to a level that I would have never seen coming. And it's been just the most fun ever. So yeah, it's definitely changed, I think, how the kind of entrepreneurial side. And for me, it's more about learning to the point where you know enough to actually go and do it, rather than doing it first. Is probably where I sit on that now.
How the representation game has changed. Like, you think back to old Hollywood, kind of, agents and stuff like that, trying to get deals for their clients and things like that, and how it's kind of evolved. You definitely disrupted the representation game as far as what you did for the Sidemen and kind of making them your exclusive, kind of manager client. And I mean, it's just such an incredible story. It really, really is. And I mean, even getting in the room with some of the biggest brands in the world. Do you ever feel that kind of, imposter syndrome, a little bit like, what am I doing here? Or have you ever had people kind of just be like, you're young, you don't know what you're talking about? How have you been received in those boardrooms?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me now, especially, again, you have to have this fearlessness where you just go like, who cares really, like what other people think, and it's probably been the biggest. It's the hardest thing for most people to overcome. I'm not going to say that I'm like 100% like, yeah, I don't care at all what people think. I think anyone saying that's somewhat disingenuous, but I think to a large extent I've trained myself habitually to not care really what people think, and to be able to have conversations at a high level, knowing that we are the experts in what we do and that we have credibility in what we do, and people are there for us, or they're engaging in the conversation for us, and what we know and how we know our audience and how we know to build brands, whatever it might be. And I think because of that, especially now, there's enough there to back up what we're saying. And really, I think the more you spend time with people at a top level, you realize that no one really knows what they're doing to any like crazy degree. I think most people are working it out, right? And I think the majority of people at the top, in big brands, in big agencies, etc., they want to learn, right? And they're there because they are curious and they're intelligent, but not because they're experts necessarily. They are actually more skilled at galvanizing others and learning and adapting. So I think, for me, I love nothing more now than being able to go into rooms and speak to brands, speak to commissioners, speak to channels, and just go in with a fearless mindset of like, we really know what we're doing in this space, and there's so much that you can learn from, and actually trying to provide as much value as I can in those conversations. I think the reception is really good. Like, I've never really had any sense of you're too young, like what are you doing here, or you don't know what you're doing. I can't think of any example really actually where that's come through, and I think that's because I've sort of stayed in my lane and hopefully not been arrogant enough to think that I know that much more than I do. I know what I know, and I've experienced what I've experienced. I can't talk for anything beyond that, and I think hopefully that kind of maybe playing down, or like trying to keep a modest frame in terms of my own knowledge and experience. I would never say I'm exceptional or brilliant or special in any way. Like, hopefully that softens it, rather than trying to charge in and be that guy who knows it all. And I think that's something that I definitely learned at YME when I started there, and when I was like 19 or something, 19, 20, and having to be like a 19-year-old C-suite position in a company full of people who are a lot older than me. Like, how do you cement your own credibility, and how do you like find your voice in that business, in a voice that is respected but also humble and modest enough? And I think I definitely didn't get that right at the beginning, because I kind of came in thinking, as a previous like founder, CEO, whatever that means, of my business before, I had to come in with that authority, and I had to be that guy who knew it all and was able to be commanding and have that voice. And I think I learned very quickly. And Mary, who I'll always credit as being like the biggest, she's now the CEO of YME, she's like one of the biggest people in my life, but from a sort of career development and personal development perspective, she once told me, like, you're coming across arrogantly, like you need to stop and you need to change it. Not in those harsh words, she would never, but she said it very like perfectly, to cut enough to like get the message through, but also was very nice about it, and it changed my whole mindset. And after that was quite early on. After that whole point, everything changed and became a lot smoother. So I think it's hopefully that it's not coming across as if I know what I don't know, and staying, I think, nicely within my lane is probably helped. So
no, it's such a positive story, because a lot of the young founders that we do talk to are scared of exactly that, kind of being laughed out the room, not getting the same amount of respect. But to hear your journey, obviously it's not the same in all, it's probably not going to be the same in most industries, but that's a really positive story for sure. And I just want to kind of get an idea of kind of the scale of the team behind the Sidemen, because obviously there's 7 main faces behind it, in front of the brand rather, but how many people kind of work behind the scenes, whether that's commercial and content creation itself?
100%. So we got 7 Sidemen. We did an org chart actually recently for them, and it was, I mean, it's humongous now. Like, it's a real beast of a system. But they sit as the board at the top, and then we have myself, Aaron, and Sam as their kind of director team. If it was just us at the beginning, Victor sits as the 4th one of us, but Victor also is operationally in the trenches, if you will, of their content team. So he's their head of content, and he's exceptional. He's completely transformed the process, the structure, the way that the boys are able to have more time, which is, again, our biggest job really, is like, how do we free up their processes, their lives. So we are like as little of a nuisance as possible, and we are as little in their ear as possible. We can automate their world. Like that's the best thing, so they can enjoy more time, and they're not as stuck in it, because before they were doing far too much for people at their level. So I think we have sort of streamlined that. Victor's done an incredible job of doing that, and he was previously running Side Plus, so the membership club. We've then got under him, I think he said to me the other day, it's 35 people now working under him, a combination of freelancers as well as full-time staff. So that's everything from thumbnail designers to thumbnail strategists to, optimization individuals looking at data to, actual producers, freelance directors, people like Con, obviously, who is their director and their cameraman. Tanya TP, who's their sort of producer who runs the show on Sidemen Sunday. She's managed and built that whole show from nothing, really. She's incredible. And she has Lucy under her, who's a set designer, art director / set designer. So you've got this sort of Sidemen entertainment content engine, which is all about just the channels. Chip Fat on more Sidemen, Tice. You've got all these people now across the kind of content side of the business, and then you split that on the other side. You've got the kind of corporate or commercial side of the business. So you put in there teams like the Sides team, the Vodka team. You've got we're actually launching soon. I don't know when this is coming out, but we're launching a ventures business, which is coming soon. So we've got a team for our ventures business, which should be launching, I think, at the end of this month. I don't know when this is coming out, but either way, but that's coming soon. We've got what else have we got? We've got a whole team, project managers, directors, charity reps who are helping with account management for our charity match and our Christmas songs and all of those things. We've got this whole team of people on the commercial side of the business, as well as performance as well, like CRM, copywriters, etc. And then you've got the entertainment team, which is more about the content team, which is more about the day-to-day management of the content week by week. And that is, again, about 35 people. So I'd say there's about 50 people between kind of full-time, part-time in those two parts of the business. And then the extended team is probably upwards of 150 plus people in terms of the chefs on the sides, the people at Vodka and the wholesale, all of the different people that kind of spring out who we don't even know or see day to day. That's a whole other army of people. So yeah, it's a big growing business. I think we've got an amazing team of people, and it's exciting to think with all the different things we've got coming, which I can't talk about just yet. We've got so much happening that that's only going to grow and grow.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And when you think about this journey that you've been on, just with the Sidemen chapter of your career, how do you think you've changed your leadership style and developed it? Kind of dealing with all of these different teams. Is it something that you've thought about, or is it something that you feel has come quite naturally to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think on a personal level, I can speak for me. I can't speak for Aaron and Sam, who obviously leading in their own ways and in their different lanes. We'll have our separate lane, which is really nice. I kind of lead on creative, strategy, all those things again that I've done before that I know how to do pretty well. Aaron is very much the commercial lead, so he'll look at all kind of brand deals, like making sure that every kind of commercial partnership and agreement is great, and he's brilliant at that. And then Sam is across the finance side, so he's obviously accountant by trade. He knows that well brilliantly. He leads on all that kind of money and financial things as well as other things as well. But yeah, that's kind of our three buckets, if you will, and it works really well. I think on a personal level, my leadership style and sort of on that creative and strategic side of the business especially is around really being aware every day that if we're doing a good job, we should be the least talented people in the room. That means for me, we're doing a good job in terms of hiring, development, and building our teams. We should not be doing the work day to day from a groundwork level. Again, that means we're not doing our job. Our job is to scale something, and that means it's about finding exceptional people, working with them to free them up to do their job to the best of their ability, rather than us sort of getting stuck in. Even though it's tempting at times, one thing that Neil Rodford, actually former CEO of YME, he taught me when I was working very closely with him, was you should not be doing the work. You should not be in the weeds. And that's the hard bit when you move up the ladder, if you will, corporately, is you realize, the things that I actually love doing, I kind of can't do anymore, or else you're not really working for the best of your team, because you're taking it off their hands. You're not building a structure that can do it without you. And I think it's constantly replacing yourself. That's the biggest thing for me. It's again, being the least talented person in the room and replacing yourself constantly is something that I'm just obsessed with. How do we get to a point where we've just automated a system of individuals who are exceptionally talented, and you are leading them to get them to a point where they don't need you, not the other way around. I think it's finding that kind of balance and being able to do that effectively that I think is, as I've developed on them, a good kind of mark of leadership. And then also around, how can you look up, like how, if you're looking down too much at the day to day and you're not being able to look up and look ahead, then how can you really plan? How can you develop? How can you look forward? And I think we've done a good enough job of that, actually. And people like Victor, who has just been transformational. I mean, he's like just an unbelievably talented individual who's taken so much off our hands in terms of that operational day-to-day management. So for me, I can look up and go, right, what's next? How are we developing new relationships, new partnerships, meeting new talented people that then come and create new buckets of our business that, as is happening now in development. So yeah, that's the biggest thing for me. And hopefully it's a good way to be. I think I would hate to be a kind of dogmatic, like very fierce person. I think me, Aaron, and Sam all share that. Like we are very much around this concept of high freedom, high trust. Like give people a lot of freedom, give people a lot of trust, but then also hold them accountable. And I think if we, for me, like that blend is the best for everybody. So you're not micromanaging people constantly, and you're also flushing out those who can't do that, and can't sort of hold that level. And I get that it's difficult for people, right? High freedom, high trust environments aren't always for everybody, but we're trying to cultivate one that is of the best of the best. I think so far so good, really.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. Kind of sticking on that on the business. Obviously, one thing that many business leaders have to go through is kind of a journey of kind of securing funding to kind of help with their growth. Could you just give us some kind of idea about how you guys have managed the funding? Is it all self-funded? Just give us a sense of how that works.
Cool. So I think it's all the interesting for us is we're unique in that we have one client. So because we have one client, we're essentially building out their team, and we are, I would say, like the kind of CEOs of their world. So it's a very different structure. If you've got a scaled management business like a YME or pick any company where you have multiple clients, the challenge of that is that your resources are going to be shared. So you could never, for example, ask the client to pay for resources which are being shared across multiple individuals, multiple talent, obviously, right? That wouldn't make sense. And if you're trying to apportion costs for each client, how do you even start to do that, right? Because you're spending 3 hours on one and an hour a week on the other, whatever it might be. Whereas with our situation, because it's so clean and everything is in the interest of the Sidemen and their expansion, their growth and their development, they can ultimately fund their business because we are hiring for them. So they fund it, and our businesses then, as they develop and become successful, have then funded the growth. So it becomes a really interesting thing where we're then not conflicted and we don't have to raise money. It's a beautiful position, to be honest, because we don't have to raise money. We have access to capital, which we can invest on their behalf. But it's almost like we are like a wealth manager would be. We are like investing on their behalf into a team and then managing that team for them. So ultimately they invest the capital to do that, which is a complete shift. And I found actually at YME, one of the challenges we definitely had when I was there was around commission and the kind of, the squeezing of that margin when you're then trying to put that back into services, and then clients aren't paying above and beyond that commission for services which really go above and beyond the scope of management. So it really traps, I think, the margins, and it makes the business squeeze, and it's difficult once you set that precedent. Well, okay, you're going to get this service and this service and this service. How on earth do you break out from that? Because people ultimately will always want more and more for less and less. So again, I think one thing we've definitely learned from this process is to make sure that when you are deploying on behalf of a client, like they should be investing. It shouldn't be you being like, yeah, we'll invest into a social manager and this person and this person and this for you, and we'll pay for it out of our commission, because ultimately the commission is for you as a manager, that's for your time as a team, not for the services as well. And I think that is a shift, really. And more the agencies are very transactional in nature. They don't do that typically. Some do in America, for example, the 360 management side of things, where they're taking everything, but they're also investing in services for the client. I think America's a bit better at being more brutal around, right, this is what you pay for this, but then and this is what will be out of our commissions, our time to secure, let's say, these deals or to help you in this way. But beyond that, you have to pay for it and you have to invest. So I think it's a much cleaner, fairer way of doing it, and ultimately means that managers can actually not be in a position where the more they grow, actually the less their margin is secure, because that is typically the way I've seen it in the industry.
Yeah, no, it's really, really interesting. And obviously the creative economy itself, it's still relatively in its infancy. You're looking at kind of 10, 15 years it's been going, really. But I mean, I came across a talk that you'd done where it's worth about $16 billion in market value across the creative economy. So to give you some kind of idea, the audience a bit of an idea of the scale of the economy that you're talking about. But what would you say are the risks to the creator economy? I mean, obviously there's the rise of AI. You're also looking at kind of, there's various things with IP, especially, in China, people ripping off IP. What would you say are the main risks to the creator economy?
Oh, interesting. So I think the risks for me. I think you mentioned a couple of the ones that jump out. Things like AI are interesting as tools, but also but people are by our fallen nature prone to misuse things. So I think it'll probably or it is getting misused, and I think that'll have an impact, especially on things like copyright and everything else. There's been instances, pretty horrific instances of girls being deepfaked and all this sort of stuff. Like that whole side of things is pretty challenging for creators who are constantly exposing themselves and are constantly on the front line of in terms of audiences. That opens you up to being a target for misuse. I think other threats for the creator economy, things like I think one of them is maybe not directly to the creative economy, but to the impact of it, is that the traditional world just doesn't wake up to what's going on. I think that's probably one of the biggest threats taking place, not in relation to the creative economy, because I don't see too many threats that creators face. I can go into one, but one of the biggest is the traditional industries not waking up and realizing like Prime is the new Red Bull for this generation. Like in 10 years' time, who cares about the brand for virtue of the brand's sake? People care about the brand for either the brand personality or value. So if you ladder in to a product, a creator who embodies all of those traits that brands are often trying to cultivate in their brand, and they've already developed that affinity and that love, how much further will that product go than sitting on the shelf next to something that is ultimately a corporate faceless institution? And I think I look at what we're trying to do with Sides and with Vodka, and we're already doing, and we're proving that when Sides is next to KFC, if the price point is the same, why would anybody go to KFC if the product's also good? And that has to be the key as well, right? The product can't be bad. Same with XX Vodka. If you've got vodka on a shelf, XIX next to Smirnoff, if anybody knows the Sidemen, they will buy XIX if the price point is close. And I think it's that mindset which I see clearly, that this is where things are going, where your warmth to a brand is amplified times 100 when a creator is driving that brand and it's founded by them, versus when it's a corporate faceless organization. And I think we'll see a shift over the next sort of 10 years massively, whereby I think Mr. B said it on the side. I think on the sidecast actually, he said that like there will not be Coca-Cola in 10 years' time. It will not have relevance. What will be relevant is, let's say, Prime or Mr. Beast Coca-Cola, if he wants to ever do that. Like that's what will be relevant. The Sidemen's version of X. And so for us, it's about having as many high-value, quality products and that really provide value for the fans, not doing too many in ways that are kind of cynical, but making sure that we're providing constant value in what we're doing, and we're looking at various different industries and saying how can we do this better than it's currently being done. And I think it should see over the next kind of 6 months to a year, there's a number of different things we're trying to do, like hotels, for example. There's one thing that we're looking to launch soon. It's probably going to be pushed back from summer just because of one of the building we were looking at fell through, and we're looking at a new site, or we're looking at new sites at the minute. But hotels, that whole concept, like why can a hotel, the hotel experience typically for younger people is pretty terrible, which is why Airbnb has dominated, because that's more interesting than traditionally hotels are. And so why can't a creator come in and disrupt that and do something that's different and more interesting and more engaging? So we're all over it. We're like, right, we're going to try and enter this space in a way that has never been done before and do something that's cool and that's interesting and different and just caters to that audience. Because no one really is, I don't think, especially in that space, and in a number of different fields, they're not really catering to that Gen Z audience properly. Or else they would be engaging with creators. And I think in a lot of the traditional markets and industries, they're just not even aware of it yet. So that's definitely a threat, to circle back to that question, that these industries don't wake up and then creators just come and take them over. And I think that will happen consistently over the next 10 years. The other threat that I will say creators do face is AdSense and the ad monetization. It's a threat and opportunity. The ad monetization model, which I can only see is getting more and more squeezed. Like the way that YouTube, for example, has been demonetizing videos, the way that Twitch has been suspending people. Like there is a real catering of these platforms to the ads that ultimately pay the bills of these platforms more than the creators do. Even though the creators are the reason why they're getting the eyeballs in the first place, the brand becomes the client, not the creator. And if they were smart, they'd flip it. And I think the way that, for example, like YouTube is squeezing creators to death in terms of what you can and can't do, it makes it a torturous exercise to try and even put something out there. Even the Sidemen with their huge team, that they have in the back end. They even are getting videos demonetized, and they're having to really strategically work around that system with things that should not be demonetized. Like objectively, there's no reason it does not breach the law, but then breach the rule. Sorry, but then once it gets flagged, you've got another 3 days to wait, and then you can get it appealed. And you've lost out revenue during that time. Like you can't get that money back. So I think you'll see a number of platforms come up that are more about free expression, and there'll have to be solutions. Maybe it's more creators taking things off and doing things more privately. Maybe it's other platforms rising up. It's as you've seen in streaming, things like Kick and others who are more about sort of free speech. Rumble, the same. So I think we'll see a movement to that, whereby platforms that are huge and have real dominance by ads, they lose their hold on creators because they aren't allowing for expression. When creators really realize, I think, that their audience are there for them, not the platform, they'll just go to wherever they want to and have a lot more control and ultimately more commercial upside and freedom to express themselves creatively as a result. So yeah, those would be my threats, I think, both outside the industry and then within.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, it's such an interesting one to follow with the creative economy. It really is. And, when you look at the guys who stayed big for the best part of a decade, obviously, the Sidemen, you mentioned Mr. Beast, other people who have been around, obviously evolution is very much a part of that. So that's a really good business lesson that you can take to always evolve, make sure you are changing and not kind of standing still. What other lessons do you think business leaders could learn from the creator economy, and obviously in your case the Sidemen?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that I have learned through my podcast, so I run a podcast as well called Unbox, where I speak to trying to shine a light on the creator economy in the UK specifically, because there's a number of platforms like Colin, Samir and others that do an amazing job of sort of using or educating people through the creator economy in the US, but there's nothing really here in the UK. So set up Unbox to kind of be that resource for the 75% plus now, and all the surveys, it goes up and up and up of young people who want to be creators and want to enter this world. So that's the aim of that show. And one of the best things for me about doing that has been the learning myself, sitting with all of these incredible creators and hearing them talk about their business, talk about the creator economy, what they see coming, their fears, their hopes, all this sort of things. And I think one of the things that is really evident through speaking to every single person is just how much you need to adapt and evolve what you're doing, exactly as you're saying, right? You need to be able to constantly reinvent yourself, to push to the next level, to develop your brand and business. And I think from a creative perspective, that's really exciting. For business leaders, I think they should take that same mindset of constant adaptation. Like I think Josh Zerka tweeted once that evolve or be extinct, and it's something which should be hung on every wall of every major institution and brand and channel, platform, everything. Is like evolve or be extinct, because you have no right to your success currently necessarily. You have no right to be an institution if you don't evolve to the audience who is truly the customer. They are not there for the institution's sake. They're there for the value that it provides to them as a consumer, as a customer. So if that value goes, or if that customer changes and they don't move with them, then ultimately they will become extinct. I think that will happen. So I think it's thinking like a creator. It's one thing which comes through in the show a lot is the idea of this sort of restless, somewhat insecure drive to be like, right, I don't deserve to be in my position, but I'm not going to let this position go. Like, I'm going to constantly keep pushing every single day. And I think the other thing as well is that we are all creators now, like by virtue of the internet, by virtue of social things like LinkedIn, and then, the way that consumers now engage with brands, engage with individuals. We are all creators, and I think we have to think like a creator in order to succeed in this new world. Having the mindset of putting out content, being able to provide value to people, tell stories, being able to use social proficiently. Like, these are the skills which people now really need. If you look at every industry, even things as adjacent as finance, like how many incredible people on Twitter are like influencers in their own right because they are brilliant at finance or brilliant at crypto, for example, completely adjacent field. Or even footballers. Everybody, right? Everyone is a creator now. People who you would never think are now in this position because of social. So I think it's having that mindset and not being afraid of that, and really taking advantage of the huge opportunity to build your personal brand and to cement your position in whatever space you have as a business leader, as somebody who is a thought leader in their industry and in their space. And I think for those who can jump on the personal branding bandwagon, so to speak, and realize that they are a creator, there's not that much that distinguishes them from many of the biggest in terms of, their background, where they come from, the value they provide. I think leaning into that is going to be crucial over the next 5 to 10 years. And that's, again, one thing that's come through consistently in Unbox. It's like, you need to be present, you need to be in the arena. And I think people who aren't are going to really struggle as this whole personal branding world just becomes more and more dominant, I think. And things like TikTok, real short form, that whole world of short form content really amplifies that as well, because it's all about the personality. It's about quick value, it's about storytelling, and so on. So I would say to business leaders, lean into that space. Like, you are a creator, whether you like it or not. You have two choices. You either run away and hide and do your business in silence, or you lean into this massive opportunity. And I think you'll thank yourself in the next 5 to 10 years if you do that.
No, that's absolutely brilliant. There's so many good takeaways there for our audience. So thank you very much. It's now time for a very special segment. We've teamed up with the Jill Dando News Centre to bring you the Good News Postcard. Jordan, today your question is from Ben, age 12.
Hello, I'm Ben from the Jill Dando News Centre at World Community School Academy. My question for you is, are you happy with what you've achieved to date, and where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
Amazing. Hey Ben, so thank you so much for that great question. Am I happy with what I've achieved to date? I would say yeah. I'd say yeah, for sure. I could not be happy. I think it's been an amazing sort of 7-8 years in this industry. I think I'm constantly realizing the more I do, the more there isn't really a ceiling, and there also isn't really a moment of consolation where you feel like, okay, this is it, this is great. I think it's constantly about the journey and moving on to the next thing, pushing what you're doing further and further. And I think being always with the mindset that like today's your first day. Like I always feel like that was something when I was at Vice actually that was pretty big for me, was making sure that every first impression and every day felt like the first. And I think therefore you're constantly happy even though you're not maybe looking at everything as being like complete or finished. So I think I am definitely happy in where things are, but there's always room to grow, always room to improve, and I'm excited for what's to come. So, and then to the second part of the question, which is where do I see myself in 5 years' time? I have no idea. Quite honestly, I don't know. It's another thing that I've definitely learned over the last 7-8 years is I don't have goals or ambition long term, and it's a bit counterintuitive. But I've never sat there and said, actually, like I want to be here doing this. I want to be this person or in this position, because I think actually what I've learned is when you go from sort of opportunity to opportunity and you develop your skills, you might find yourself in completely different fields and in different spaces which you'd never think that you would be in. So for example, for me, going into sort of the world of like branded content publishing to then end up in management or in marketing with Business Roundabout, and then in now management with James Grant, YMU, and then the Sidemen. Those are completely different worlds, but I would never have sat there and said I want to be managing talent or I want to be working with talent. I didn't even think about talent at the beginning of my career. So yeah, for me, I have no clue. I think it's basically just about building out what we're doing. I'd love to see all of the brands and businesses that we've been launching with the Sidemen develop and come on immensely, of course, as I know they will. And then we'll see where we're at. I think. But thank you so much for your brilliant question.
No, it was definitely a brilliant question, and it was a fantastic answer from yourself too. So, last kind of question from us. We are business leaders. So, what would you say makes a great business leader?
So, I think a great business leader is somebody who is humble, who is leads from behind, not in front. Somebody who gives others a platform for expression and who is trusting, and somebody who knows their weaknesses is probably the biggest thing, rather than acting like they know it all. So knowing your weaknesses, and also just someone who's nice. I think like the biggest thing that I've found, the best people and the people who you remember are the ones who are just kind, nice, fun, who don't take things too seriously and who have those traits. And you really notice like the people who you're in the room with who are the opposite, you don't want anything to do with them. And I think you won't be alone in that. So in a weird way, the best way to generate more business and to grow your business is to actually have those traits and to be a kind, nice, good person, but not doing it for that cynical reason. You should do that anyway. But yeah, it's a funny thing. And I think for me, all of those things are what makes a good business leader. And hopefully, there'll be more of those people out there. I think there already are. I feel like actually randomly over the last sort of few years since COVID especially, more people have taken things a little bit less seriously and have kind of calmed down, I found, which is great. So yeah, definitely a great generation of business leaders coming through, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree. And do you have any final words for our audience today?
Yeah, I think my final words would just be that, whoever's out there listening, hopefully I've been able to give you something from my experience, my somewhat limited experience in this whole world of work. But certainly there's some value there. Keep doing what you're doing wherever you are. Keep smashing it. I'm sure you will be. Just know that you don't know anything. I think really that's like the biggest thing. Just know that you don't know. And I think once that clicked for me, everything changed, because then you really become free, and you're not then trapped to this idea that you have to be a certain guy, you have to be a certain woman, you have to be that person of authority. You really don't need to be. And I think working with amazing people is the best way that you can upskill yourself and create amazing results. So yeah, know that you don't know anything. I think it was Plato, Aristotle, one of the Greeks. No, I think it's Plato actually who said that. I think you can check me on that one again. I'm tired, I can't remember. But knowing that you don't know anything is really when you start to realize how you can do your thing. And I think for me, once that clicked again, everything changed. So yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed listening. And if anyone wants to follow me, obviously they can hit me up on LinkedIn. If anyone wants some advice or anything from me, that as much as I can, like email me at jordan@arcade.media, or DM me on LinkedIn or Instagram or anywhere else. So thank you. Hope you're having a good day wherever you are. And thank you so much for having me on.